If you take a look at addressable TV, it can often be a bit confusing because it's one of those things that's been around a while, but it's now being referred to in a more new way, in part because the explosion of streaming television is known to be a highly addressable platform. So this idea that the scale of television and the growing scale of streaming can have the precision of digital targeting is something that I think is now reawoken in many advertisers and agencies. And I think the survey really did point out what buyers are looking for or what questions or concerns that they have. And it can offer us as a art partnership ecosystem a lot of ways in which we can make things easier for buyers so that this can really grow to where it needs to. There's a long history of supporting addressable TV within LiveRamp and within the combined LiveRamp and Axiom from years ago. But one of the things, and I think a core asset that we have is that LiveRamp maintains a subscriber file match process with MVPDs that is, of course, very much privacy secured. But that match allows us to be able to look at the universe size of any MVPD against an audience, right? So you can grab an audience from an advertiser through a first party onboard, or grab a segment from the LiveRamp data store, which is the largest of its kind. And we would basically allow for more instant counts, meaning if you grab this auto intender segment and you want to know how many households it can reach on Dish, we can give that calculation very quickly. And we can do the same thing across all the MVPDs. So if you're an automaker and you want to look at, well, if I take my, for example, lease ending segment of households that I know have a vehicle that's expiring, and I want to add on this additional in-market auto segment from the data store, how much can I reach, right? How many households can I get to? So we've been doing that for quite a while, and that business continues to grow with overall addressable. The other fastest growing part now of that market for us is the ability to have partnerships between programmers and MVPDs and programmers and CTV platforms. So if you are a large programmer like a Viacom who's also involved in the study, and let's say they want to create a more scaled addressable minutes partnership with an MVPD. So let's say that a lot of the set-top box VOD is going to get unlocked on the footprint of a dish. We can help join those universes, once again, in a privacy safe way, so that you know how much you will have in terms of scale for households now on that footprint, which is a combined footprint of Viacom plus Dish. So that's really powerful, and the partnerships are accelerating amongst the sell side, which is the right thing to do, because if you look at the results in the survey, there was a lot of, well, how can we get scale with less friction and more interoperability? And this is precisely one of those things that we're doing. So this is really that first step in terms of how to get more scale in terms of targeting amongst the sell side. And then we can talk a little bit later about the measurement, because that's another piece that came up quite highly in the survey.
Yeah, Jay, well, let's talk about measurement for a moment. What are some of your thoughts and some takeaways from the study?
Yeah, having a unified and what they were calling a single measurement standard for addressable was the second highest question answered in terms of percentage. 73% said that was something they were looking for, because it just shows you can't run addressable and then still measure things on an age and gender proxy, right, in that commercial break, because that break will no longer function like a typical age and gender measured commercial break, because now you've changed the targeting in a certain amount of households, right? So what is going to be important then if you're going to do addressable? Well, if you, sticking to what I was talking about earlier, if you're focused on reaching a certain section of the auto market, well, what's the total reach against that auto market segment that was bought, let's say, across 5 providers? How many total households did you reach and how many times, right? That would be what you want to know. You wouldn't want to know a proxy of how much adults 25 to 54 you reached. You want to know that particular audience. And then even where it's already going now, and what we have a lot of experience doing with the Data Plus Math platform is actually doing addressable lift. So when addressable was used, what was the actual lift in sales or web visitation or mobile app installs, any of the types of outcomes that you can measure, you can do that specifically for addressable. So that way an advertiser knows that when I invested in addressable specifically, this is the increase in performance that I received.
And Jay, let's talk a little bit about addressable and glass. We hear a lot about, and you're starting to work with some of those folks. It's quite interesting. The OEMs becoming players in addressable. How do you think that will shape up? What are the prospects there for national addressability through the glass?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it at its core, really a footprint like Vizio and Project Or is another MVPD in essence, right? It's a distribution point for programming, and therefore it becomes an opportunity to create addressability, right? Because each of those televisions is connected to the internet. There's identifiers, there's opt-in in and around data use. So those are already basically treated in our Connect Select platform, what I was describing earlier about MVPDs and how we can size the universe of an audience against how many TVs are in that footprint for a particular MVPD. We can do the same thing for a smart TV maker. And so those OEMs are getting partnerships with the programmers who can then decide to make some of that ad inventory on their national ad breaks more addressable, right? So ad replacement is to be the first use case. So if you're not going to swap out, let's say you're not going to swap a automaker for a detergent maker, you might just be using different creative for that automaker. So one household could be a really good target for an electric vehicle. Another one might be a target for an SUV. So you can optimize the creative and still keep that ad break. So if you are a programming partner with Vizio, that's the kind of optionality you will have, right? And so we're working with the programmers and Vizio to be able to say that, well, if you pick these two segments for that ad break, this is how many TVs you can replace that ad on. And then that gives the programmer the ability to make the decision in terms of what kind of deal they'll strike with the automaker to do that kind of ad replacement. Yeah, I think the interoperability piece is well on its way. I think the ability to get an advertiser a total count of how many households and TVs they can reach with a particular audience segment, and having that also be able to be looked at from an overlap perspective is really important. So I was describing a lot about how our Connect Select platform works with the sell side. We are now creating views for buyers within that. So with the permission from the seller, if they, let's say 5 MVPDs, 2 OEMs, and 4 streaming platforms all authorize a large automaker to get counts, then that automaker can take a first-party audience segment and look at what scale they can get across providers, and then instantly be able to do RFPs or initiate an addressable deal with all the providers who gave them permission. So that really does take away a lot of the pain point of like sending out 10 different RFPs, waiting for the responses, not understanding the overlap or the true scale. We can solve for that, right? And the industry is solving for that. So I think that's going to reduce a lot of the friction in getting folks to try it, right? I think the other piece was the buyers very much looked at like that middle of the funnel, of the sales funnel, in which they feel addressable can really offer a lot of value. And it was interesting to see the overlap between addressable and mobile video. They seem to have a strong correlation in the funnel in terms of this is the point where an advertiser is looking at that tactic to be able to really hit that part of their campaign. So if that continues to be the case and we make it as easy to scale as you can in mobile video, then that should be really important for the growth for addressable TV.